Hi, everyone. It's Mary Brownlee, licensed professional counselor. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I appreciate you also hanging in there with me. I'm still trying to figure out the lighting and the cameras, and all of this YouTube stuff is new to me. So thanks for bearing with me. I'm still trying to figure out my favorite setup, and I'm trying something new tonight. So I appreciate your patience. We'll be talking about generational trauma today. This one's really important, I think, for a lot of us, who are abuse survivors, family trauma for sure. This is really helpful in understanding that, we are not responsible for all the generational abuse that has come before we were born into this world. A lot of times we might only think, well, it was just mom or dad that was the problem. Or actually, I should back it up and even say most of the times we feel it's our, behavior or our lacking in some way that was the problem. I would say that's the first step, that people come in feeling like there's something terribly wrong with them. And then maybe through some healing, they start to realize, oh, it's not me, it's my family. They're obviously have had generations before me where a lot of these dysfunctional behaviors have gone on. And so, yeah, this is kind of part of the healing process, is to understand that we were not responsible for what has occurred to us, despite what our family may or may not say to us. I see a lot of times clients coming in being blamed for a lot of things that were not their fault. And we'll go into a lot of those really negative behaviors that can happen in a lot of unhealthy families. A lot of those behaviors, for example, scapegoating, blame shifting, unrealistic expectations, verbal abuse, lots of those unhealthy behaviors, which I will definitely go into detail in other videos. That's kind of what I'm talking about. So when those type of behaviors happen extensively to somebody throughout the course of their childhood and young adulthood and even into adulthood, it can really cause them to do a lot of self-blame. So we are going to kind of delve right into it so that you can kind of see what this looks like firsthand. I am going to share my screen here. Laptops, aren't they amazing? So much better than my phone I was using for the others. I'm going to share here this wonderful picture that will give you an idea of what we're talking about here. All right, so the power of breaking generational trauma cycles is profound. So that is the work we are doing here when we come in and work on our own trauma. For example, here's you. You can pretend you're the adorable little child over here. And hopefully, if you don't have trauma, you have a parent that has told you they love you and that you're worthy and that you're special to them. And they've raised you with that nurturing, behaviors that we talked about in some of my other videos, that authoritative parenting style where you have high warmth, appropriate discipline and expectations, but really high warmth and encouragement. But if you didn't, then yes, this one would not be something that you would really be struggling with in terms of trauma symptoms. So really what this looks like is we hopefully will become this person here. That's the idea here, is that we are becoming the chain breaker within our own families, where we really not only self-heal, but break that transmission of generational trauma from one person to the next, to the next, to the next. So, for example, this might be us, and then here is your parent, mom or dad, maybe both, and then here is their parent. And you could make this go back even further, for example, great grandparents, great great greats, etc. And the idea is that one generation abused their child who grew up, had children, then abused their child who grew up, and so on and so forth. And down it goes until finally somebody says, enough is enough. It stops here with me. So that's really what we're talking about here. All right, let's see here. I'm going to share my next screen here. I have created a pretend family here, a pretend patient. And so here we go. Here's pretend patient down here at the bottom. This is called a family genogram. Family genograms are used in family systems therapy, Murray Bowen being the founder of family systems therapy. I have training in systems therapy, so I really love family genograms because they can really help people begin to see patterns in their families that they were otherwise unaware of and alleviate some of the self-blame. A lot of these abusive patterns came far before you came into the world, and you're not responsible for what happened to you. So we are going to go person by person in this family tree, basically. Pretend, you are the patient here and you're coming in with a mental illness. Maybe it's complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Maybe it's depression, anxiety. Maybe it's identity issues, or you're coming in with something to my office, for example. And we begin to map out your family. And what we discover is perhaps you had a sibling, for example, who struggles with alcoholism. Perhaps they were abusive to you while growing up. And then maybe you have another sibling who, although they saw the abuse that you were going through, they didn't do anything to stop it. So let's go up another generation here. This is your mom and your dad. And for example, your mom displays kind of codependent and enabling behaviors. Your dad is the one that's abusive. Perhaps your dad also suffers with a mental illness. Maybe it's depression or anxiety. Maybe it's something like narcissistic personality disorder, or one of the other personality disorders. But your dad basically has demonstrated abusive behaviors your entire life. Maybe he has verbally abused you, or physically abused you, or sexually abused you. But he has been your main abuser. And your mom, the enabler or the codependent, is the one that has kind of looked the other way and has not really done anything to stop the abuse from happening. And so dad is not only abusive towards you, maybe he's abusive to your siblings as well. Maybe he's also, demonstrates emotional neglect, for example, and maybe he's violent as well. This little mark here that you see, this is demonstrating a cutoff. So when two people no longer speak to one another, or there's an estrangement, we call that a cutoff. So let's say you are cut off from your father. And let's go up mom's side of the tree here. Aha, look, we have a cutoff between mom and her mother, or I'm sorry, her sibling here. She has two siblings, sibling one, sibling two. Ah, look, she's cut off from her sibling here. So we start to see a pattern of people having estrangements in the family. That's usually a red flag that there's abusive behaviors. Estrangements do not happen for no reason whatsoever. Never in the history of histories have I ever seen a client come in with an estrangement that did not have a very good reason for it. A lot of times estrangements happen as a last resort when other methods have been tried repeatedly and nothing worked to resolve whatever the issue was between the two individuals. So yeah, estrangements are a sign of very poor communication, abuse, stuff like that. So let's see, say your mother has two siblings. One is abusive towards her growing up. The other one, she has poor communication with and has cut off from them. And what does she have here is, an abusive father figure. And again, her mother was the enabler. And so this is really what was shown to her when she was a child. Pattern of maybe her father being abusive and violent, her father also demonstrating unhealthy, toxic behaviors, and grandma just also enabled it by not doing anything. She showed inaction. And so your mom ends up basically learning from her parents that abuse is something that we ignore. There's a lot of rug sweeping, I call it, in families with abuse, where there's secrets, rug sweeping, looking the other way, guilt tripping, blaming the victim for the abuse. Basically a ton of, I would say like a lack of accountability, shall we say. Nobody's accountable for harming anyone. And so let's just pass the buck and maintain status quo by secret keeping and rug sweeping and pretending everything's fine. Very, very common in families like these. Let's go to dad's side here. So look, dad also has a cutoff. He's cut off from one of his siblings as well. So it's interesting how we can see cutoffs on both sides of the family. Clearly, this is a pattern of people who are not able to communicate and have lots of conflict and potentially quite, abusive relationships as well. So in this case, pretend that your dad's an alcoholic and who's demonstrated lots of neglect and just has been absent, and that when he is drinking, sometimes he's violent towards your grandmother. So there's abuse and domestic violence going on as well that your dad has witnessed. And maybe your grandmother has mental illness, for example. Maybe she struggled with depression. So what's interesting that we see here is that grandma's mental illness has been passed down to your dad, but also your dad witnessing all this abusive behavior when he was a child has translated towards him being abusive towards you, as well as the neglect and the violence. So this kind of gives you a great idea of how these patterns pass down from one generation to the next until they eventually come to you. And as I like to say, it's the gift that keeps on giving. It's not a gift you want, but it is a gift that keeps on giving. And so this is our task, to break generational trauma. All right, I will stop sharing now. So I hope that this demonstration has been helpful in showing you what some of these patterns look like in your own family tree. Feel free to create your own family tree or your own family genogram. Feel free to add in people's names. You can add in things like if they had mental illness or substance abuse issues. You can add in things like sexual abuse or cutoffs from one another, estrangements. You can add in conflict. In family systems therapy, conflict is marked by kind of a jagged line between people. But feel free to map your own family tree out, because this will give you kind of a window into how far back the dysfunction in the family goes. Because likely, and this is what I've seen the vast, vast majority of the time, people's family trees are filled to the brim with dysfunction and abuse. And it's no wonder then that we find ourselves inevitably in a therapist's office with a lot of trauma symptoms and not quite understanding what has happened and not knowing where to go, and in a lot of cases blaming ourselves. So yeah, generational trauma is something that can be healed. Again, we've talked a little bit about internal family systems therapy and how that has been really helpful for this type of complex trauma. I'll talk more about that in some other videos, but I just want you basically to understand the abuse in your family was not your fault. You're as much a victim as any other, person in this tree who has gone through abuse. And I don't want you to carry the burden of shame and self-blame. This is really helpful for understanding the larger picture, and that you can move forward and kind of break the ties with your own family, if need be, to free yourself from the suffering. There are various things people have done to try to free themselves from this type of environment. I like to say that you cannot heal yourself in the same environment that broke you. So sometimes there's a level of no contact that is established in order for the patient to heal. Sometimes, depending on the abuse, if it's not quite as serious, people can go what we call low contact, where maybe they see their family, for example, for holidays or birthdays, but it's for a limited period of time and then they kind of skedaddle. So I really tell my patients, it's a unique case by case basis. No one is going to have a one size fits all, approach. Each family is different. Ideally, it would be nice to maintain contact with family. No one really wants to be estranged. We would all actually really love to have connected, loving, safe relationships with our family members. But oftentimes the pain and the suffering has been very intense over many, many years. And people really have tons of trauma symptoms anytime they're around their family members. They'll have lots of, like complex PTSD symptoms, for example, or panic attacks or extremely high anxiety. So, I always tell patients, if your mental health is suffering anytime you are around or communicating with your family members, and you are not feeling well and it's becoming a high degree of distress, it may be time to think of going no contact, at least for a period of time, maybe while you're in therapy and healing. And then potentially when you're feeling better, we might talk about reestablishing contact or contact with boundaries, for example. So we'll go over a lot more of these type of scenarios in other videos as well. But I just wanted to kind of throw it out there for you as some beginning ideas of what healing looks like. So when the whole system is broken like this, it pretty much is near impossible to have healthy relationships with a lot of members in the family. The whole system has been broken. It's been broken for a long time. And if a lot of people in the family are not aware of these trauma patterns and they're still traumatizing individuals around them, they're not healthy for you to be around. Again, you cannot stay in a system that broke you and expect to heal. No, what's going to happen is you're going to keep getting harmed and triggered, and all of that trauma from years and years will be flooding your system anytime you're around them. And that's not helpful. As again, my favorite trauma expert, Dr. Vanderkook, he has said, you cannot heal when you're around things that have traumatized you. And re-experiencing trauma is not healing. It's not healing, and it can make it worse. So that's the general message here. So I really hope that you have found this helpful. Please feel free to comment, ask me questions below. Please do give my videos a like, and don't forget to subscribe. There will be lots more coming, and I really appreciate every single one of you. And I hope that you will be well, be happy, be healthy, be safe, and I'll see you next time. Take care.